welcome back to Hope Cottage. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. It is 5:07 on Friday night, so almost time for Shabbat, and I'm so looking forward to it. I always look forward to Shabbat, but this particular week, I really need it. Hasn't been a bad week, just a busy week, right? Tonight I want to talk to you guys about the topic of should we keep Torah? Not like necessarily how to keep Torah, but should we? Is it even for today? Does it even apply? I get a lot of questions about that. If you are new here, my name is Sarah. I am a Torah observant wife who has been married to Jamie since I was 18 years old. That was 28 years ago. And we have 9 children who are 26 down to 13. So 3 of them are out of the house, 2 of them are married, 1 of them has kids. So we also have 3 grandkids. And then our 2 oldest daughters live here at home with us, and my 4 teenagers I am homeschooling. I have been a homeschool mom for 23 years-ish, and I'm almost done. We have about 5.5 years left, so yeah, after that, you guys are going to get like 3 videos a day because I'm going to have nobody to talk to. But welcome. I am glad you're here. If you notice that there are lots of followers and not very many videos, I've been on this channel for about 6 years now, but I recently deleted like 400 videos. I taught Torah on here for about 5 years. And nothing has changed about, you know, what I believe and all that. It's just that I wanted a gentler tone. And so yes, they're all gone. I don't have them saved anywhere. And I wanted just to start over again with just, I don't know, just a spirit of kindness and gentleness. My videos definitely got gentler as I went along, but I learned a lot in these years, and I just kind of wanted a fresh start. So anyway, welcome. I'm glad you're here. So I have in my files lots of writing from over the years and different things that people have, you know, asked and thought about and stuff. And so every now and then I like to do a Q&A. And so today's Q&A is basically, should we keep Torah? Is it for today? Has it been done away with? Is it really even possible to do it, right? So it's not, this isn't going to be like a step-by-step how to do Torah, more of a, I don't know, invitation. And the reasons why it's still applicable today. So this is a compilation of a lot of questions that I get about this topic. And I've kind of like, you know, combined questions and topics, so I'm not being redundant. But if there's something that I don't cover and you would like me to address it, be sure to leave it in the comment section or send me an email. My email is in the description box, and I will be happy to try to help you find some biblical answers. All right, first question is actually kind of more like a comment. It says, the law is impossible to obey, and that's why Yeshua had to die. All right, so if you've been in church or around Christians for any length of time and discussed the law, that's what you get, right? It's kind of, unfortunately, a pat answer to sort of poo-poo away the questions that discerning people have, like, why aren't we doing this stuff anymore? You know, because people read the Bible and they realize, oh, well, God gave us all these other instructions and he never told us to stop doing them. So why aren't we doing them? And then someone will answer with, oh, well, you know, Jesus' sacrifice, it's done away with now. So we don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. That's not true. Let me just tell you, that's not true. No one in the Bible teaches this, least of all Paul. Paul's whole ministry, I think, could be summed up with someone who is kind of trying to repair the damage he did. So Paul, before he, you know, found Yeshua and found salvation through Jesus, he was a Pharisee. And so he was a Torah teacher who taught Torah. But he didn't teach Torah correctly, unfortunately. And he has spent his whole life looking to Torah for salvation, right? Better Torah teacher you are, better salvation you're going to get. And if you don't follow Torah, you're not saved. And that was just something that, you know, I'm being very basic, but that was kind of the message, right? And so now he's realized, whoa, it's not about keeping the law. It's about having a relationship with the Father and his Son, the Messiah, right? And so Paul's teaching, he never negates Torah. He negates the idea of following Torah in order to be saved, right? In order to find salvation through keeping instructions, through the works of the law. He's like, that is dead. That is not the way this is happening anymore. We've got to follow Yeshua, right? And accept him as our Messiah and walk as he walked and accept his free gift of salvation. And then, because we love him, then we do these instructions. Then we walk in Torah, right? But the first and most important and essential step for eternity with God is accepting the free gift of salvation through Yeshua, which has no strings attached, right? Just gotta love him. Just gotta love him and claim that he is the Messiah, right? Lay down your old life and pick up this new one in him. So that's what Paul taught, and whether deliberately or innocently, people have twisted so much of Paul's teaching to fit this narrative, right? That Yeshua did away with it all. No. In fact, in Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 14, God kind of saw this coming, right? He sort of saw this mentality coming. And so Yahweh tells us, he actually says, after he's all done giving the instructions to the people, right? The full Torah at Sinai. Then after that, he says this: "For this commandment, which I command you today, is not too mysterious for you, nor is it far off. It's not in heaven that you should say, 'Who will ascend into heaven for us and bring it to us, that we may hear and do it?' Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, 'Who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear and do it?' But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it." So he tells us plainly here, you guys can do this. He's being kind of sarcastic even, right? He's a parent that's like, guys, really? And he's like, you guys can do this, right? It's not too hard. It's not too distant. It's not something that you can't understand. You guys have the ability to do this. You can, so do it, right? We can do this, and we should do this, right? God tells us in many places, including Exodus 31:13 and Ezekiel 20:12. He says that keeping his Shabbat is a sign of his covenant with us. It's a sign that we are his. Yeshua actually even follows up with this. He says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." So if you believe that Yeshua is part of the Godhead, but you also believe that the commands are done away with, then you're going to have to reconcile Yeshua's instructions on that, right? Yeshua taught straight up Torah, and he never told us to do any different. The law is not impossible to obey, and that is not why Yeshua had to die. So let's get into that in this next question, actually. The question is, how do I know what commands still apply? Now, this is a very common question. I get this a lot. And at just face value, you could think, oh, well, this person's just trying to do the bare minimum. Like, all right, what do I have to do, right, in order to be this Torah pursuant person that you are talking about, right? But actually, I think what's going on here is these are genuine people who really do love Christ, and they don't want to negate what he did for us. They don't want to do things that would minimize his sacrifice, right? And I believe this because I spent a lot of time in the church, both before I came to Torah and since coming to Torah. Our family is still in fellowship to one degree or another with brothers and sisters who are Sunday Christians, and we see this line of thinking, right? They don't want to do anything that's going to negate, or not even negate, but just minimize, right, what Christ did for us in his sacrifice by giving his life. And because they believe that the law is too hard and that's why Jesus had to die, then, they just carry it to this next level, right? Those laws have been done away with. They were done away with Jesus' sacrifice. So why in the world would we want to pull them back up again when he's already done away with them? And again, that's a misunderstanding of Paul and what Paul is actually getting at and teaching. And I think, their heart for wanting to not dishonor their Messiah is commendable, right? So let's be careful about passing judgment, because that's probably not actually where they're coming from, right? They really do want to honor and love God, and so they're trying to be very careful. But yes, the church has taught that law is done away with, and we know that there actually isn't anywhere in the Bible that says that, and Paul definitely does not preach that. In fact, Christ was actually keeping the law by dying and in the way that he died. Now, I don't have the time in this video to go into all of that. I might make one at some point. But you can start your own studies if you want to by looking at Numbers 5. That is where the test of the adulterous woman comes in, and read about what has to be done for this test to see if the woman has committed adultery on her husband, and what happens if it's proven true, and then compare that to things that you know about Christ's sacrifice, and the actual sacrifice, crucifixion day. You could also go to Deuteronomy 24, and that talks about basically what is needed for a person to remarry, right? There are some instances in which a person is allowed to remarry, and then there are some instances in which a person is not. And the way that Yeshua died and the fact that he even did goes along with that law. And so he knew that, right? God was making sure that the Messiah kept the Torah perfectly. And so he actually modeled these things for us, which is completely missed. And I've never heard that taught in a church ever. And it's missed just because many, Sunday Christians, traditional mainstream Christianity Christians, they just overlook so much of the law. I've heard over and over again that Leviticus is the most boring book. And, if we have to slog through that in their 1-year Bible study or whatever, but nobody really takes the time to sort of make these connections. And so, I would encourage you to do so. All right. The truth is that when God gave us the full set of instructions at Sinai, that's what the Torah is, right? Torah just means instructions or teaching in Hebrew. He said that these were for all generations of people who loved him. He said there was one law for the native and the sojourner, right? We call that sojourner, we call that grafted in nowadays, right? The native born DNA Israelites, Hebrew person, and then everybody else who wasn't actually sharing DNA, but sharing the same God, Yahweh, right? Those people are grafted in. So when we become a Christian, we're grafted into the family of God. God told him that day, this is for everybody, both native and those grafted in, and that they should be followed, these instructions should be followed by all generations of people who love him. That is God's last word on it. He never tells us any different, right? So I don't know, that's just the biggest reason why I follow them, because he never told me not to, right? They are for today. So the question that, logically is actually being asked here is which ones still apply. Because obviously some of them apply because they're keeping the 10 Commandments, right? So the easy answer is all of them. All of them still apply. They're all still as important as they ever were. It's still the way that God's government functions. So I think really what the question should be concerning this is, which ones can we do today? Now, when we get to that question, we realize that there are some that we just cannot do for various reasons. And if we were to do them, we'd actually be dishonoring God rather than honoring him as we are trying to do, right, by keeping his law. There are laws that are just for men, just for women, just for children. There are ones that are just for employers, or, the wording is more along the lines of masters over, slaves or servants. That's not really a part of our culture anymore, thank God. So we can sort of move that over to employers, right? People who are in charge of others. There are certain laws that only priests can do, that only, Levites can do. And so we have to be careful that we are not doing something that has actually been tasked to someone else. If we were to do that, then we would be dishonoring God. If I step into walking out commands that have actually been given to men just because my husband won't do it, I am in violation of God's law, because not only are we supposed to do his law, but we're supposed to do it in the way he told us to, right? That's where things get kind of fishy, because people say, well, there's a lot of things we can't do in the way he told us to. And that is correct. We'll get to that in a second. But we just need to be very careful that what we do is not something that would directly dishonor him, keeping one part of the command while sinning in order to do so, right? So for instance, here's something that happened to me actually just the other day. On the calendar that we follow, our Passover is actually starting at the end of, starting a week from today, okay? So first part of May. So I went looking for lamb, right? Yesterday I was getting our groceries for the next couple of weeks, and the only lamb I could find was halal. And just heads up, people have told me this, and I never really looked until this year, that the lamb at Aldi is usually, if not always, halal. And that just means it was prepared in a certain way according to Muslim tradition, and it has, its blood, I guess, has been offered up to Allah, I guess, is, the best way to put it. So it's things that have been sacrificed to other gods, basically, right? Which Torah tells us definitely not to do. So my conundrum was, do I buy the lamb so I can keep the command of, eating lamb at Passover? But if I do so, I'm breaking the command of eating something that's been offered to another god, right? So what do I do? So I didn't buy the lamb, and thankfully our Walmart had one lamb chop. So the 8 of us, and possibly my son's family of 5, are all going to share a little bit of one lamb chop. But that's what I get for not diligently planning far enough ahead. So I'll be on the hunt for lamb chops throughout this week to sort of fill that meal out. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole lot of chicken. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? We can't do part of it if another part of it is going to cause us to sin, okay? But we'll talk about more of that in a second. I wouldn't take a sacrifice out to my backyard and cook it on the barbecue wearing, my bathrobe, because the Levites wore robes and they, did the sacrificial animals over open fire. I can't just recreate part of that. It would be very not okay for me to do that, right? So we just can't do those things because it's not our place. We don't have the right setup. And that's okay. That doesn't mean we don't do everything. And we'll get to that. We'll talk more about that in a minute too. But things like wearing tzitzit, eating clean, keeping the Sabbath, remembering the holy days, like all that stuff I can do, right? I can do them mostly. There's a few things especially concerning holy days that I can't do, but I can do something for all of these things. I can do my best, right? And I think that that's probably what the Father wants. If you had an employer and it gave you a list of 10, I've said this example before, if your employer gave you a list of 10 jobs to do, and you look over the list and you're like, okay, well, I can do like 7 of these, and I don't know, 2 of them I can kind of partially do. I just can't do the whole thing. And one of them I cannot do that. Like, you want to hand the list back to your employer and be like, sorry, I can't do these. I can't do any of these, right? No, you would do the 7 that you can. You would do the 2 that you do partially without, disrupting workflow or whatever. And then the last one, you just say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to give me grace for this one because I just can't do this right now, in the way that is proper and right. And so that's kind of how this is, right? We just do what we can, and the things we can't do, we just say, Father, is there a way I'm not seeing? Can you show me a way that I'm just not seeing here? And if there's just no way, then you just don't, and you just say, I can't wait for the day when I can, right? Some people are concerned that we're not doing things in the land, right? They don't do certain commands because we can't do them in the land and in the way that it's commanded. And that's, that's a fair case. I would say to that, I think of Daniel and his friends, right? They were in captivity. They were not in the land, yet they still refused to eat the king's food, right? They refused to bow to the other gods. Like, there were things that they could do to still honor Yahweh and his commands, even though they weren't in the land. We also see in 1 Corinthians 5, we have Paul who is preaching about the Passover to the people of Corinth, right? Corinth is in Greece, and the intention here is that they would learn about Passover and understand it, and that they would understand the actual heart reasons for it, how it connects to Yeshua, and then do it, but do it in a way that honors him, right? And that remembers him. And so that's, outside the land, and that's a New Testament example. So I do think that we can do things even if we're not in the land. We just need to be careful that we're not doing things that actually dishonor him. Now, if you really truly believe that whatever, this is can only be done in the land, and you're doing that based on your interpretation of Torah, then I personally respect you for that. Not that it's any of my business either way, but, just if that's something that you believe and if that's one of the things you're kind of going back and forth on, I would just encourage you to pray about it, because the Father is not going to be like, not going to tell you, you're going to have to guess. Like, he will make it clear to you. The really important thing is to shut out the voices, right? Shut out the voices of other teachers and teachings, and really just focus in, because this is something he wants you to wrestle with on your own. If you're wrestling, if you're wrestling, he probably wants you to wrestle on your own for a little bit and actually hear it, straight from him. I have had people express frustration because doing these things only halfway seems to kind of cheapen them for them. It makes them not as special, these people say, right? And I think that is the point for this era of people. It makes us yearn for his perfect ways, right? When we do these things and we understand the significance of them, and we understand the prophetic significance of them, and how everything points to each other, and it's pointed to Yeshua, and it points to him still, and just all the stuff. And it really is meaningful for us, but we know that it's missing. It's not exactly, it's not quite what it's supposed to be. It makes us look forward even more to the time in which it will be what it's supposed to be, right? It makes us anticipate his coming even more. It makes us anticipate his millennial reign and, our life forever with him. It makes us hunger after that because we know that we're missing something. There's a whole world of stuff that people who are not walking in these instructions that they just completely miss. So many times I can remember myself just hungering, just crying out because there was an insatiable hunger in me. And so much of that has been fulfilled as God has shown me his good ways in Torah. So those other things I believe will be fulfilled as well someday. But I do think that, his law, even though, we're keeping it imperfectly, he wants us to keep what we can because it keeps it alive in our hearts. It keeps it applicable in our hearts. We are not meant to find fulfillment in this, really. We were just meant to do these things to remember and to practice and to wait. Are you saying dinner's ready in 5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I just got the 5-minute warning, so I'll talk a little bit more and then we might have to finish the rest of this in the dark. Next question. I grew up being taught that if we keep the Mosaic law, we are making the cross of no effect. I've been taught Romans 10 that Christ is the end of the law for righteousness, that he is the new Torah. I would say that Christ is more like the living Torah. Because he walked out the Father's ways perfectly, he gave us an example of the perfect way to walk out God's instructions. And it's all based on our love for God and our love for one another. We see when he's given the Sermon on the Mount, right, that Yeshua is saying things like, you've heard it said, do not, commit adultery. However, I say, if you even look on a woman, right, those sorts of things where he's clarifying Torah for us. He's helping to refine the understanding. He's being the living Torah for us. Just your own personal interpreter, which is fantastic, right? When Paul is talking about being dead to the law and things that we find in these scriptures mentioned, right? He's saying that we can't use Torah keeping as like an indicator of whether or not we are saved, right? Because it isn't. It isn't how we find salvation. We know that we are saved when we trust Christ for salvation. And when we come into a relationship with him, right? We lay down our old ways and we are new. Paul was writing mainly to people who had been walking in Torah for so long, and it was their measuring stick of how to be a good Jew. So when Paul talks about grace so much, and he uses harsh language talking about the Torah, this is not, he says things like Torah keeping is of no use, right? It's not that he doesn't think that we should follow it anymore. It's just that it shouldn't be the main thing. We trust Christ for salvation, and then we keep the Torah as he did in order to walk like him, which is exactly what he told us to do at the end of Matthew 28, right? With the addition of go and teach other people how to do this also. And it's really just about loving him, right? Like I said, he said, if you love me, obey my commandments. We actually see that this was actually God's way all along. When we read Genesis 15:6, as well as in Romans 4:3, it says that Abraham believed in God and it was counted as righteousness. He believed in God first. He had the relationship first, and then he learned the instructions. It was relationship first then, and it is relationship first now. We only make the cross of no effect when we are trusting in Torah keeping to save us. Then, the cross doesn't matter, right? Because we've had it all along. We've had it for 7,000 years. But the truth is the Torah never has saved us, and it never will save us. It's merely an instruction manual to tell us how to walk in God's ways, how to live God's ways. And that's really fantastic, right? If you had this kitchen appliance that was just sitting on your kitchen counter for years, or even in your garage for years, and you're always just like, I really like that thing and I spend a lot on it, but I don't know how it works. I know the basics, but there's so many features on that thing that I would just love to be able to grasp and make use of, and I just don't know how that thing works. So it just kind of sits on the side and you're just getting the basic blending from it or whatever. But then one day you're going through some papers and you discover your instruction manual and you're like, oh my goodness, I know so much more about how this thing works now and all of its features and all of the awesome things that, have been put into this thing. And that's kind of what it's like when you discover the truth of Torah and how much it, what it means and why it's applicable today, because it is our instruction book. It opens our eyes to so much that we just missed. It's all the things in the church that just kind of, for me, it was all the things in the church just kind of stopped short, right? It just stopped short of what it could be. And the Torah just finished it off. And I'm like, that's why that's the way it is. And it just answers so many questions for me, right? So, okay, I'm coming. Okay, I gotta go have dinner. I'll be back later. Okay, next question kind of goes along with that as well. The person who is writing the question is talking about people in their family who did not keep Torah, but were still like Christians, believed in Jesus as their Messiah, and believed, their understanding of the Bible, but they just were not Torah keepers. And it says, I think about my grandparents. They were dedicated to preaching the gospel and served the Lord their whole lives. Did they go to hell because they ate pork or didn't keep the Sabbath? And my answer to that is that no. If they had Yeshua as their Messiah and they trusted in him for salvation, they are not in hell. One reason I think that we know that, if we look back at how it relates with Torah, is in Matthew 5:19. Matthew 5:19 says that those who teach against Torah are going to be found least in the kingdom. Okay, so that means that they're still in the kingdom. They're just found to be least. So those of us who are walking in Torah and teaching it to others, we might have a higher place in the kingdom. Maybe we have more responsibilities. I don't really know, what that looks like. And I don't think the Bible really gives us a clear picture of what that looks like. But they are in the kingdom, right? Because salvation is not found by keeping the Torah. Salvation is found by trusting in Yeshua as your Messiah. Remember, Abraham believed first and it was counted as righteousness, and then God taught him the instructions and the way to walk like a believer should. God never said, Yeshua never said, no prophet ever said, no one who should be taken as biblically serious has ever said that we are saved by keeping the law. All right, next question. What about all of the Jewish traditions that are tied to occultic practices and things? I don't want any part of that in my worship, and that's why I stay away from Jewish holidays and traditions. I think there's a lot of wisdom in staying away from any man-made holidays and traditions that directly go against the Word of God, right? And that is all debatable. So you'll probably never actually see me get into that too deeply here on this channel, because I have opinions that are unpopular to Sunday Christians and I have opinions that are unpopular to Torah keepers. So it's just one of those things we won't touch. But my answer to this is, one important thing to remember about the Sabbath and about these holy days like Passover, Day of Atonement, the practices of avoiding pork and such. These are biblical practices. They're not Jewish practices. They're biblical things. They're things that God taught to his people how to walk like a believer in Yahweh, not how to walk like, a Jew, which is just one of the tribes, Judah, the tribe of Judah, right? If they're found in the Bible, then they're not Jewish things. They're biblical things. Now, humans have corrupted them with all crazy stuff. Yes, definitely. But these things were implemented by God for his people to follow. So this is why it's so important not to skip over those books of the Bible that are full of his instructions. When we know his instructions, then we can separate what was actually given by him and what was created or added by humans. And then we can, rightly divide the word of God, as it said. We got to know the whole word. We got to know how it all works together. That does take time. But a lot of things can be learned by discernment through prayer. And I think that God first gives us kind of an inkling, right, through discernment, through prayer. And then as we go through the word, looking for the answers to that thing we're kind of picking up by his Holy Spirit speaking it to us, then we actually find it truly written there in the word. Becoming Torah observant does not mean becoming Jewish. There's a lot that I do not know about Judaism. There's a lot I do not want to know about Judaism. It's no more or less than any other religion that doesn't include Yeshua, right, as the sole figure, the Messiah. I don't want to know about Islam. I don't want to know about Buddhism. I don't want to know about, Satanism. I don't want to know that stuff. So it's not picking out Judaism. It's just saying I don't find any purpose in studying all of the untruths if I would rather spend my time studying truth, right? And then when you know biblical truth, well, then you can recognize unbiblical truth all over the place easily. When we accept Yeshua, we are grafted into the family of God, right? We're not grafted into Judaism. We're grafted into God's family. And being a Torah observant is something that a follower of God does. All right, friends, that's all I have for this one. I hope that blessed you and encouraged you. Like I said before, feel free to leave any questions or comments about all of this in the comment section, or you can send me an email. My email is in the description box below. I hope everybody has a beautiful Shabbat and a fun weekend, a great week ahead, and I will see you again soon. All right, bye-bye.